Hey Leo,
Hi.
can you grab me the box from the front door? Bring it to me.
Yeah.
Oh, that must be the 1D X.
Welcome back, Deep Review TV viewers. Chris Nichols here, and today we are looking at a very early pre-production copy. We got our hands on a Canon EOS-1D X Mark III. Now this is very early, but we are still going to be talking about some of the main photographic features today that we think are very interesting about this new platform, and there will be some sample photos for you, but keep in mind this is all pre-production. We can't process the RAWs and so on and so forth, but you'll get some files to play with. Now I also want to let you know that there's some exciting video features on this camera as well, so we have another video coming shortly to explain those as well. The other thing I want to mention, this camera is still under embargo. Luckily on the outside it looks pretty much like a 1DX, especially when you cover the little Mark III badge down here. But luckily it's New Year's Eve. It's a pretty quiet town right now. Everybody's out vacationing, so we shouldn't have too many problems with people wanting to check out this kit and blowing the embargo with their cell phones. Nice. Now, body design on the 1D X Mark III looks very much like the other cameras, very familiar. It has lost 90 grams, but I've probably lost muscle tone since I played with the 1D X Mark II, so it weighs the same. It's a heavy camera, no doubt. I do like the new illuminated buttons. That's a nice feature. We're seeing that on a lot of high-end SLRs now from other companies, so I was glad to see it here too. The AF on button has changed. We're going to talk about that more in just a bit. Now we still have the same battery that you'll find in the 1D X Mark II. That's nice because you can of course upgrade and keep using those batteries, and they give us excellent battery life here. I mean, over 2,850 shots through the OVF, and off the back LCD panel you're still going to get well over 600, and those are SEPA ratings, so it goes way beyond that. I can shoot all day in the cold and still have the confidence they're going to have tons of battery life yet. Now the charger is of course that huge beast of a charger, and that's great. It does a good job. It's fast and everything, but we still don't have any USB charging on this camera. And that is an unfortunate thing. I don't know if the power requirements don't meet it or what, I don't get it, but that is a really nice convenience, and it can save you when parts go missing. We have all the classic ports here that we normally get. Now, for a pro sports camera, you want connectivity, you want to be able to upload photos remotely very quickly, so we do have an Ethernet port here, as well as the option for their new adapter, which is the dual antenna that you can buy. Same thing you use on the C500 Mark II, and that goes right here through the wireless file transfer port. Jordan, look, I'm using the vertical hand grip.
I'm proud of you.
For the first time ever. I'm never going to do it again. I actually don't like the dial position. I really got to crank my finger back here. I don't know. I'm just going to, here we go. Yes, that dial works great now. Now, what's quite exciting about this camera is our new file format. One of the benefits of JPEGs is they're compressed, they're small, and they're easy to share and easy to work with right away. But as you may know, with JPEGs, you can't really edit them. There's just no room to push or pull these files without doing damage to them. So now we have these HEIF files, these high efficiency image formats. Now, the benefit here is we're actually getting 10-bit structure instead of an 8-bit structure. We're getting some extra room, dynamic range, capability to push and pull shadows and highlights, but we're still getting a nice small file. Now, in fact, one of the more recent series of cameras that use this HEIF format would be the more recent iPhones. And I would direct you to actually check out our video where we talk about smartphones, because Rish and I go fairly into depth on how HDR files work, and that's what an HEIF file is. Now, if I also put this onto an HDR capable display, I'll actually get to see that extra dynamic range expanded. So this is another benefit to shooting the HEIF format. Now, as usual, you do have your classic RAW files, and those will still give you the most potential, the most malleable file to really push and pull things. But this HEIF file does give us a nice, compact, easy to use file with some capability to push and make use of our HDR displays that JPEGs just can't do. Now we have a brand new 20 megapixel sensor on the 1D X Mark III. So it's the same megapixels as the 1D X Mark II, but this sensor does promise to give us better characteristics. Now it is too early to tell exactly how this sensor is going to perform, but one thing that we did check out was rolling shutter with the electronic shutter mode. Now a couple things that we noticed. First off, looks like very minimal rolling shutter. Fantastic for any sort of video capabilities that you want to explore, but also of course if you want to shoot silently in a wedding, this will also be a beneficial thing for you. But you still want to be careful with fast pans and flickering lights because you'll still get some weirdness there. Now the other thing that we did notice with that, electronic shutter mode does not work right now in the camera when we're using the HEIF files. So it might be a JPEG RAW only thing. You could of course shoot electronic first curtain with HEIF, but that just kind of gives you a little bit less shutter shock. Now the 1D X Mark III gives you twin CF Express card slots. It's the same form factor as XQDs, but amazingly, although one of the faster formats, they have nothing on CF Express. It is an incredibly fast format, which really does give you the full potential of this camera's capabilities. So if you're shooting fast action, you're gonna want CF Express cards. The downside is the real pain in the ass, because first off, it's very hard to find the readers. The cards themselves are incredibly expensive. We've been transferring everything off into our computers just right through the USB connection, but it's pretty slow and flaky. So overall, this is gonna get better, but it does give you an incredibly fast throughput rate. Now you may know that I like to use the AF on button to focus instead of the shutter mechanism, and on a sports and wildlife centric camera like the 1D X Mark III, I would actually assume that a lot of photographers out there are going to be the same way. So this actually does something very interesting. We have a nice, big, easy to press AF on button, but it now actually has a sensor for your thumb, and you can slide your thumb across this button to actually move your autofocusing point around. Of course, the major advantage here is I don't have to remove my thumb from the AF on button, and I can still move my autofocusing point around. It should make everything more responsive. You know, otherwise, classically what I'd have to do is take my thumb off of it, go to the autofocus joystick and move it around, and then go back to the autofocus on button. Or if I'm shooting off the live view interface here, I can use the excellent touchscreen that I've got here. But again, I have to remove my thumb from the AF on button. When I'm going through the OVF, I can put my thumb on here and I can adjust it very quickly. So quickly, in fact, with such a sensitive interface, I'm actually struggling with it. I think it's going to take a lot of practice to get very familiar with it. It's very easy to move the focusing point around when you don't want it to. First off, I'm finding just by pressing it and then letting go, I often move the focusing point off of where it initially was. The other thing I'm finding is it's largely dependent on what focusing mode you're in. If I'm in large zone AF, I only have 3 choices, and I can very easily move my focus right across the frame without wanting to. Now, if I'm using all 191 autofocusing points selectable, then it's actually very good. It's very manageable because it's quite slow. I've got so many points to move it across. If I go to 151, just the cross type sensors, I find that to be a good compromise. I can move around fairly quickly, but it's not mega jumpy. But if I go down to 61 points or even less, it's just too fast and it's too erratic. Touching this button moves my focusing point all over the frame way too quick. It's not all bad though, because keep in mind that in the menu there is an option where you can adjust the sensitivity of the sensor, and that's a great way to help you find a good balancing point. Now the 1D X Mark III has a brand new processor. This is the Digic X processor. It is an X, it's not a Roman numeral 10. So for everybody who's been screwing up the iPhone and calling it the iPhone X, you're good here, keep doing that. Now what this gives us is better autofocusing capabilities. We have now the same coverage as before on the 1D X Mark II, but with a lot more points. We're up to 191 over 61. It's 155 of those are cross type. I mean, that is excellent to have. Now Canon have done something else interesting here. They've replaced the classic line sensor array with these square grid type arrays, a lot like what your image sensor looks like. It just gives your autofocusing system more scene information, better autofocus, and that'd be amazing if that's all they did. But now it takes advantage of deep learning techniques in the OVF, and that's very cool. Now, subject tracking on this camera is engaged whether you're using zone, large zone, or the wide full area autofocus. And when I was testing this out, I was finding that it was more often than not focusing on people's faces and on their heads. It's supposed to be able to determine a person's body and their head. And Carrie Rose from dpreview.com did get some good sample photos of some basketball players, so that should give you a good idea of where it's focusing on those players. For sports, that could be a really nice benefit. So I would say in my experience, I was finding it was seeming to choose those areas a little bit more often than not, and that's a nice plus. Now, I want you to keep in mind I have not had much time on this camera at all, okay? We just received this. With the limited experience that I've had through the OVF, I would say that it's very good focusing. I mean, this is probably the best OVF focusing I've seen out of a Canon SLR, but it's still not perfect. We're still getting some misfocused shots. It doesn't seem miles ahead beyond the 1D X Mark II, and this will take more testing to really find it out. Despite the fact that we do have those deep learning techniques, at least it is a step in the right direction. Now, when we go off of the LCD panel, on the back, it's a different story. Now we're getting a setup very similar to what we see on the EOS-R and RP. They've been improved quite a bit, and I'm finding here the face and eye detect work great. My hit rate is definitely higher than when I'm shooting through the OVF. And so that's all a really nice positive, except holding a full-size SLR with a long lens like this out in front of you so you can focus off the back screen is just not very comfortable at all. And so that's going to be a real issue here. Now, on the positive side, you are getting the best focusing on any Canon camera now, whether you're going through the OVF or off the back LCD panel. But you're gonna have to decide which one you want to use. And frankly, the LCD is just not that convenient. Also, make note, we don't have a flip out screen here. It's a solid fixed LCD. Another reason why I'm really gonna find myself using the OVF more and more and more. We got a lovely sunset here to close out the video, and these are my final thoughts on this very early look at this camera. So certainly a very powerful SLR. I mean, it's doing everything that we want to see out of a strong, full professional body from Canon. And it makes sense because, of course, 2020 Tokyo Olympics are just around the corner, and I think this camera is going to do a strong showing. I definitely want to play with it more. It does still bring up a few questions here. I mean, first off, I love that we have new features like the HEIF mode. I like that we've got very advanced autofocusing here, and that's something I want to play with more. But really the question is also going to become, are these features then going to find their way into other cameras? Are we going to start to see this in new RF mount cameras? And when are we going to see a full mirrorless camera that's made for sports, action, and wildlife as well? I could see this new sensor, the HEIF formats, and the better Digic X processor finding their way into an RF mount camera. That would absolutely be exciting as well. I'm certainly not trying to push a mirrorless agenda. I think there's absolute room for both right now, and both camera platforms could be very exciting for things like Olympic events. You know, if you have a big set of EF mount lenses, then the 1D X Mark III could make a lot of sense because this is going to be the latest and greatest, and there are some really nice new features on it. Now, that being said, a lot of the new exciting optical formulas are coming out for RF mount. All in all, what I do find very interesting about this camera, we get the best of both autofocusing systems, both through the optical viewfinder and off the live view panel. And so this is a perfect test bed to see which one might be better when the Olympics come up. This camera also steps up the video game in a huge way for Canon. So hopefully no more market segmentation. This camera seems to be able to take over any role and become a true hybrid. So many new features, in fact, that Jordan's gonna come back and talk to you guys in a separate video about the video capabilities of this camera. You won't wanna miss that. Please also remember, check out our Twitter and Instagram feeds. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and go to dpreview.com. There's going to be all the spec lists on this camera. We don't want to go through all those in this video, but if you want all the specs and features, you'll find it there very shortly, as well as fantastic sample galleries. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you soon with the video capabilities on the 1D X Mark III.